get rid of the participants. Yeah.
There we go.
Did it yell at us? I don't know if it told us that it was recording.
It didn't.
Oh, it says it is then. Oh, okay. I guess it is. All right.
How about I do attendance just for the recording, so,
Everybody can know.
yeah, Counselor Blackwell,
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
Commissioner Driggs.
Here.
And Commissioner Buck.
Here.
All right.
I'm gonna share my screen really fast. Okay. So tonight, this is a meeting of the governance committee for the Housing and Design Initiative. I've got a presentation. There's some maps in front of you. There's a handout and fact sheet. We'll be going over all of that tonight, but in your agenda, there were 2 items. The first item is provide some policy direction. That's explore allowing housing within the community commercial land use district. So that's part of that presentation that I'll be going over on the screen. And I'll, when I'm talking about certain things, I'll point you to whatever handout we're kind of discussing. And then the second part is the outreach materials. So that's the fact page and flyer. That's separate. And again, we'll get to that after I'm done with the presentation. Okay. So again, the agenda tonight, it includes a discussion exploring the allowance for more housing in our mixed use and commercial districts. We'll provide some context or background information on this project, how this project has been guided by past plans and community input, key barriers to housing production, as discussed in the audit that we brought you guys in May. So kind of just a quick refresher on that a little bit, and how that impacts our current regulations for housing in these districts. Next, we'll go over the potential code concepts, clarify why we're considering expanding housing in the commercial and mixed use districts. Then there will be kind of a continuum, an arrow of approaches to remove the barriers to housing from kind of least restrictive to most restrictive. And we'll ask for your consideration in these topics. And then the last part, we'll go over the concepts themselves. So there's a few concepts. The first one is allowing mixed use housing in the neighborhood commercial district. And then there's 3 different options for housing along Main Street, different concepts there, and I'll go into each of them. At the end of the review, we'll just ask for your feedback on those concepts, essentially.
Is this all stuff that would have been in the?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Okay, so as you may know, Springfield has an unmet housing need. Springfield's growing, yet Springfield doesn't have enough housing that people can afford. To address this, the city is planning for what's needed to support this growth. We have found that too few homes are being built and that we need, on average, 470 new homes every year to meet the targets set by the state. We've also found that many households struggle to afford housing, with 44% of renters and 24% of homeowners spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Essentially cost burdened. If you're looking at your Springfield housing strategy handout in front of you, that's the one with all the colorful little pictures. And on the flip side, there's a little pie chart with that information. So again, through this project, we hope to update the development code to make it easier to build new housing in those commercial and mixed use districts while balancing our community's needs. So kind of on the screen, you're seeing some potential needs to think about: housing choice and affordability, livability, our economic development needs, and then the state climate rules. So far, this project has been guided by past plans and community input. We have adopted plans and policies that guide where and how Springfield should grow based on community priorities. So again, this could look like our comprehensive plan and neighborhood refinement plans. Other initiatives also explored ways Springfield could potentially change its planning framework for allowed housing uses and design standards. This project will build on that foundation by using the direction from past efforts, along with new community input. So again, we're gonna be reaching out to the community, asking for their feedback on these concepts. Before,
In the community, or are you gonna go to like developers and builders, people that actually do the work?
so both. So I have a technical advisory committee that I usually meet with once a month. That's 17 members who advise me, architects, designers, construction people. I have an existing planning commissioner who sits on that technical advisory committee. We also hope to do listening groups in the fall from businesses. We'll be notifying some of the businesses that could be impacted by these changes. And then I'm doing some community engagement events next week and the following week. So the first 2 weeks in August, I'll be tabling quite a few events.
Okay.
Yeah. And more. We always are interested in any events or feedback. Once we get clear on these concepts, we'll be happy to provide the Planning Commission, City Council, some of those stakeholders on our TAC, almost a packet that you could hand out to anybody who you think might be interested in this project. We have business cards. We'll have some, again, the flyers, the fact sheets, things that can be handed out to anybody who you think would be interested.
It just seems like there's gonna be a lot of people who don't have knowledge of that, and they're gonna have ideas that are not feasible, and so it concerns me that we're branching out to that extent to try to solve the problem,
Yeah,
as opposed to narrowing it into the folks that actually do the work and figure it out, so.
yeah, I hear you.
I also, what's the working definition of affordable housing that we're working with?
Yeah.
So it varies. So if you
Right.
remember last year, I brought forward a package of income qualified housing, and it could range from 30 to 120% of the area median income. That's like the income that the average person could afford. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say subjective, but there's a range of affordability. And that's because the state has opened up that definition of affordable. Does that make?
I'll add that in the Metro Plan, so when we're using affordable housing in a land use context, it's defined as housing that is affordable for those making up to the median income of not paying more than 30% of housing. So of their income on housing. So
What's the current median income?
that's a good question. It depends on your household size. I think that sounds right.
76,000 for 2 or something like that.
For two. So when we're talking affordable housing in that context, we're median income and below is who we're mostly concerned about. But if we talk about housing that's affordable, like to anybody.
It's about 70,000 for a family of 4 as of 2023.
Which is crazy.
All right, so the key barriers to housing production. Again, in May, I brought you guys Cascadia Partners, my consultants, code and plan audit. Some of the findings from that audit you can see on the screen. So it's that housing as a standalone use is generally not allowed in most mixed use or commercial districts. So standalone housing. That where mixed use development is allowed, it is often economically infeasible to build. Most developers might not be able to pencil having the requirement for commercial on the ground floor and residential above. That most development standards would allow for higher density housing, but that adjustments are needed to the code to allow additional height, setbacks, or lot coverage. And that they found that the design standards and regulations for how Springfield uses its land in the mixed-use districts could be simpler and more streamlined. Again, many of our mixed-use code sections haven't been updated in many years. That's what we hope to do as part of this project. All right, so as I mentioned, when we looked at the agenda, we're gonna look quite a few times at kind of the continuum of housing in Springfield. In particular, what are on this slide, the current regulations for housing in commercial and mixed use districts. So on the far left, you can see that existing residential districts are the most flexible by allowing standalone housing on all sites. This makes sense, right? If you have a residential district, usually we allow housing on its own. Doesn't have to be a mixed use or commercial.
R1, R2, R3.
Exactly. On the right, existing commercial and industrial districts they're more restricted by generally not allowing housing. And then in the middle, this leaves the existing mixed-use districts. These would include mixed-use residential, mixed-use commercial, and mixed-use employment, our Glenwood mixed-use districts, and our Booth Kelly mixed-use district right outside of downtown, where you could see mixed-use housing, where you would have housing maybe on the, above a commercial use, or it could be standalone housing. It could be housing in front, commercial below, behind. So it's kind of, we think about it from a vertical mixed use, again, with that commercial on the ground floor, residential above, or horizontal mixed use where you could have commercial in the front, residential behind, or vice versa. But it's a mix of uses on a site usually, or in an area. Okay, now we're gonna start looking at what options there are for opening up housing in our commercial and mixed use districts. So Cascadia Partners, my consultants, has found 6 potential code concepts to address. Tonight, we'd like to address and ask for feedback from the governance committee for only the first concept on the screen, and that's expanding opportunities for housing in our commercial districts. The other five concepts on the screen, we're gonna explore them as we move further along in the code concepts work. And my plan is to come back to the Planning Commission and City Council with response from the community, feedback we've received, edits from my consultants in September.
On all 6 of those or
I don't know yet,
Okay.
but at least more than the first one. And that's all depending on kind of like the outreach that we do in August, what kind of feedback we get to these concepts. If we do a survey, what kind of response we get to that survey. The report that Cascadia would prepare, we would hope to give you all of those or part of those responses in September. Okay, so why are we considering existing commercial and mixed-use districts? These areas are already planned for shops, businesses, and a mix of uses. Some of these areas already even have housing as part of an existing mixed-use building or standalone housing development. That makes them logical places to consider adding more housing near existing jobs and services without major changes to how Springfield uses its land. Okay, so then some approaches to remove these barriers to housing. So before we get into the concepts themselves, we just wanted to visually show the approaches that we could do to remove some of these barriers to housing in our commercial and mixed-use districts. And again, you can see it runs along a continuum. So again, the far left is the most flexible for residential, the far right is the least flexible, generally because it's a commercial or industrial district where housing is generally not allowed. So in the middle is where we're trying to find a little bit more flexibility to allow housing. The first one in blue is the climate-friendly areas or CFAs. In those areas, we're exploring opportunities to allow housing either as a standalone use or as part of a mixed-use development. Keeping in line with that concept, we could then explore what this option could look like along Main Street. So below that, you can kind of see the turquoise options. And that's to allow mixed-use development in neighborhood commercial districts throughout the city. This would not, so no standalone housing would be allowed. It would be mixed use, again, usually with like a commercial in front or below a residential use. And again, that still reduces barriers to housing because you're allowing housing in an area where maybe you typically wouldn't have housing to begin with. It has to be some sort of commercial use. And then the other option we're going to look at is allowing mixed-use development along Main Street in our community commercial district.
It really looks so weird having houses along.
Okay, so for consideration, the first one, timing wise, these are just some initial questions and we'd love your feedback on it. The first one is, do you feel that this project is the right time to consider expanding housing options? Or should the city wait and take a comprehensive approach as part of next year's housing capacity analysis? Feel free to jump in with questions. My assistant city attorney, Christina Kraz, is here to talk a little bit more about that timing question and how that would work.
Yeah, so this is not, I just want to be clear because some of the community engagement topics around the Housing Plus design are framed at complying with state law and meeting state mandates for walkable communities, for example. So I want to be clear that expanding housing opportunities in commercial zones is not a requirement of the climate friendly and equitable community rules. It's an option that the governance committee can weigh in on, or, you know, just sort of in that creative realm of things the city might try. This is one of them, but it's not mandated. And it doesn't really like help or hurt us on the CFAC compliance route with those outside of climate friendly areas, those other things that we need to do to amend our code to be more sort of friendly to mixed use. We don't actually have to create any new mixed areas that don't already exist. The CFA work is what's capturing that, which is a separate project. So if there's any questions about that, I think that sometimes it gets framed as this would help with meeting that Oregon administrative rule. I think that's how DLCD's materials about expanding mixed uses are framed a little bit in that way, but I think legally it's not a legal necessity.
Meeting the CFEC rules
We do have to meet the CFAC
Right.
rules. This doesn't meet
would
them.
be a way
Doesn't
to
have, yeah.
possibly help.
It doesn't really count one way or the other.
Okay.
The CFAC rules are around changing the regulations for the areas that you do have planned and designated. Where this could be helpful is when we do the capacity analysis project that is also mandated under state rules. This could be one way that Springfield helps to meet that demand for different housing at different affordability and density levels. So you could decide that you want to look at it, explore it now when you're already looking at mixed use code, or you could decide that you want to look at it, you want to wait and make a decision of whether to look at it for the project for the housing capacity analysis. You don't have to look at this topic at all.
Well,
But-
at least now,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's like, do we get a head start on looking at meeting our housing need that Haley had talked about at the beginning? I mean, we know that we're not producing as many houses as people need or that the state wants us to. So when we do that supply and demand, likely we're gonna come up short. And so this is one way we could meet that need. We wanted to think on it now, or we could wait and do it later. And so this is one of those critical questions for the governance committee of, do we take this question out to the public and get their input, or do you want to say, no, we're not even gonna go there?
So I guess I'm curious as to what bar we're trying to meet now. Because as I look at this map, and if I'm reading it correctly, which is definitely a question, the kind of the blue line, right, kind of in the middle there, it looks like it'd be 42nd if I've got that correctly.
Yep.
And I think about, okay, we're talking about mixed use rated, and when I think about that area of Main Street, we could adjust the code now for allowing mixed use, but the reality of actually putting housing there would be a ways down the road, because you're talking about a lot of development and a lot of shift and a lot of change that would have to happen to accommodate that, because there's just not the space as it sits right now to be able to effectively do that. You get closer to downtown and I can see it a little easier, but I think that if the conversation is about adjusting the code so we can say, hey, we have more options, then this might do that. But if the conversation is, let's adjust the code so we actually have more homes for people to live in, I don't know that this continuum makes a lot of sense, because I think there's places that we're probably years away from being able to put housing in. And so I guess that's kind of one of my hangups there is, you know, the reality of what would it take to put housing in there. And at least from my perspective, a lot would have to change. I mean, you've got existing commercial use that's occupied throughout there. So how do you fit housing in with that? And I think there's some challenges there logistically.
I think that area between, you can kind of see it on the map on the existing commercial districts designation. It's blue
Mhm.
between 42nd and 126.
Right.
That's an existing mixed use area. So we've actually seen more housing being built there. Cherry Springs was built right off of 48th there, and that's a multifamily housing development. I don't know how many units, but that was a recent development that we actually counted as meeting part of our housing needs. So it was built in that mixed use area because we allowed standalone housing in that area right along Main Street. Otherwise, it wouldn't be allowed. We wouldn't allow that type of development to begin with. So I think usually with this area in particular along Main Street, you still have vacant and redevelopable properties in this area than as opposed to closer to downtown or some of these other areas where it's already developed. So then you have to factor in, you have a ground floor commercial use and you have to build either residential probably on top of it. And so can a developer actually make that pencil? Can they afford to build residential on top of an existing commercial use and redevelop it, so to speak, as opposed to they can take a vacant parcel somewhere along Main Street and build standalone housing, or they can do mixed use, or they could keep it completely commercial. So it's allowing those options now, as opposed to if we wait for our housing capacity analysis, it might not be completed next year. We'll start the process, but it could be a couple years out before we actually start to see that change.
So I have mixed feelings about it. One, because I think about traffic. I think about putting more traffic on Main Street, especially, you know, pedestrians and what have you. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. However, both Councilor Blackwell and I have discussed about the need to address some of these vacant properties that have not been managed and taken care of.
Especially in that portion.
Especially in that portion, to the point where we're talking about some type of a tax that would tax them for not managing that property. I feel like that's a reasonable thing as opposed to putting more taxes on the backs of people that are doing the right thing. But it might force some people to make some decisions to sell, which would then open up those properties. Cause like I said, I'm not super thrilled about having more housing there, but I would much rather look at a mixed use like Amazon Corners than some rundown, old Chinese restaurant that used to be there or whatever. So, that's always been kind of,
Vacant.
yeah, it's been like the
Yeah.
bane of my existence on
Yeah.
that part of Main Street. So I don't see it as being a negative to at least have the conversation. And again, I mean, if somebody does have the idea, they're gonna still have to pass the muster with all of the code and stuff, so. But we need to act more on those
The
to
mixed
make
use
those
commercial
available.
is so expensive, right, for development, so
Mhm.
usually it's not the number one go-to, because like I said, it doesn't pencil for most developers, and so opening it up to housing
Yeah,
would probably, I would imagine, would get a lot more interest in.
so you're thinking like apartments and stuff, is that, or you mean like an actual single family dwelling?
Well, we would not allow single family
Okay.
dwellings, but it would be multifamily, yeah.
Okay, good.
That really would make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely don't want any more of that on Main Street. That looks ridiculous. It's like business, house, business, house, business.
Okay.
Whose idea? That's the other thing. We have to look, what is our vision for Main Street and for Springfield 20 years from now? I get that we have this thing going on. I get that the state is pushing us to do these things. But I don't want us to make decisions that 20 years from now, people are gonna look and go like I am with this Main Street going, why did they allow that? Why are they doing that? So how do we want that to appear to the people that we're leaving it to?
Okay, I think that kind of covers 1 and 2, but I do want to ask about the third question. Are there any places that you believe are better suited for housing growth based on what you know of Springfield? So I might go back to a couple of other slides just to show you kind of the existing conditions. And I apologize, you do have it in front of you, but you can also sort of see it on the screen. So obviously we can see most of the community commercial does exist down Main Street. There's a couple off those arterials. There's also quite a bit of commercial up near Pioneer Parkway, like you're heading to Gateway Street too. We do have an existing mixed-use commercial over by Riverbend. So there are other areas, but again, a lot of the city, anything that's not in color kind of on that screen is residential.
Or industrial.
or
Or
industrial.
industrial. right?
Yep.
Are you talking about other areas along Main Street or are you talking about other? areas in
Anywhere,
Springville?
yeah, anywhere else that you could imagine housing being.
It's not a lot to choose from.
That's not currently just zoned residential.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think on the other side of 126, like along Mohawk, there's definitely a lot of like vacant properties there. And there's a lot of businesses. There's like Winco right there for shopping and everything. Fred Meyer isn't like super far from there either. It's just that the traffic right here is just,
It's bad.
That
it
particular,
needs street redevelopment
yeah,
for
Very
it
much
to
so.
like
that's
work,
something we've,
but-
we've talked about, yeah. It's a definite.
But yeah, that whole.
But I think it's
that
great,
whole lot.
it's close to a lot of commercial
Starbucks,
options
Yes.
for people that they like
Absolutely.
need.
One of the nice things about Marquella Meadows, it's so close to everything.
Yeah, and that is kind of something that's shown on the screen too. It's kind of hard to tell from this, but there's kind of a green outline around the CFA areas. So just a reminder, that's Glenwood, the riverfront area, that's downtown, until you hit 14th. And then 14th connects to Mohawk. That is also a climate friendly area. So we're kind of, this project is focused on those areas outside of those CFA areas.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of choices.
I do think it's a very solid point to look at those properties that haven't been maintained and have been vacant for a number of years. I think that there is a lot of opportunity to redevelop those, as Commissioner, or not Commissioner, Councilor Doyle mentioned. And I think that if we're gonna kind of look at Springfield as a whole and how we're gonna fill in housing, looking at some of those things and saying, okay, well, what's not being used? Because there's a lot of pockets of Springfield where there is a lot of vacancy, like, that spot kind of right behind, you know, kind of where Coburg Pizza is, you know, there's a huge
Yeah.
area in there. And it's like, I think there's opportunities to take a look at those kind of things.
Winco,
Yeah, the old Winco and,
that'd be nice to clean that up. So nasty over there, it'd be great.
but I mean, the same is true when you drive down Main Street and you see a house that clearly nobody set foot in probably 10 years. Same is true with commercial properties. You're gonna have the same challenges in Glenwood because we see the same thing down there. And at what point do we look at those and say, if nothing's being done, like this is space that needs to be used in a different way.
Yeah, unfortunately, if it's a personal property, there isn't much you can do without eminent domain, which I would never support ever, but, I do think that we can incentivize people, and I do think that, because a lot of them hold on to those for the tax write-off, and I think that at some point we have to make the penalty or the cost of keeping it that way more than what they're gaining from it, so that there is that incentive to get rid of it, because they aren't benefiting our community.
And those areas are close to public transportation.
Correct.
Which is very convenient.
Yep,
Yeah.
it runs every 10 minutes, and a
Yeah.
bus, and the bus station on Fifth, yeah,
Mhm.
and out on Thurston.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that if the goal is eventually to try and make Springfield, so we're probably not going to ever be a true walkable city, but if you wanted to kind of break it down into pockets, so it's like, hey, I could take a bus into this and then I could walk and do what I needed to do. And you wanted to reduce that traffic, I mean, I think there's a lot of value in that. Or obviously that's down the road, but I think that if we're really looking at areas, I don't think we're gonna find existing areas that it's like, oh, hey, that's available right now. But I do think there's a strategy to look at you know, what's not being used.
I think there's a balance too with our commercial need is not real high right now. Our housing need is, but as that housing need gets filled, we've got to be
Businesses.
careful that then all of a sudden we don't have that commercial capacity that, you know, for restaurants or grocery stores or whatnot for the people that are there.
My wife is tired of me griping about, we, out in the Thurston area.
No restaurants.
there's no restaurants.
None.
Well, you get, you
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Yeah, I hear there's a couple.
well, you have Ferrero's and then you have the Hawaiian place.
Need a steakhouse so bad.
Well, it's like if you want decent, if you wanna go to a family restaurant, you're either driving to Gateway, essentially, I mean, maybe downtown. Or you're heading out to like Walterville or Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to have like an option in town.
And you'll see that we did not address Thurston. We kind of we narrowed the project down to a certain area within Springfield because we did not want to
Hey,
impact
we're on the map.
commercial.
Yes.
Anyway, as part as the concepts go, yeah, the existing conditions versus our concepts, so where we would be looking at.
I will say that I'm very interested to see what happens down the road. Speaking of Thurston, there is space in different directions out there. How that space gets used, I think certainly can be, and well, I'm interested to see how that goes. I don't think that's part of the discussion now, because correct me if I'm wrong, but there's several steps from being able to have that discussion. I think since a lot of that's county, I think we're just outside of the urban growth boundary in a lot of that space out there. Some of it's
No, it's
on,
in the urban growth boundary, but it's outside the city limits.
right?
Are you talking about towards Jasper, Bobstrop, or Thurston in general, like Thurston Road?
Well, I think, you know, Thurston Road is one thing. I think a lot of that open space there is private property though. But if you look out Bob Straub, and if you're on the east side of Bob Straub, a lot of that area, I don't know how far, but a lot of that area from Quartz Park on the other side of that, that's owned by the school district. And I don't know where the line for their property is. On the other side, I don't know, I think that's outside. So there's currently fields over there, that's outside of the, I don't know where the lines are, you would know better than.
The dotted line is your urban growth boundary.
Yeah, and I don't know,
The school district site is that big, the school district site in Quartz Park is that big green blob there.
so I think just,
That's a big-
I think that at some point. It's like I talk to people out there and they're like, oh, it would be nice to keep that open field, and I'm like, well, it's not good. Eventually, that's not gonna be true, like. There will be a day where there'll be something there, so I will say that at some point, I know that's part of the conversation, but I appreciate you. We're not quite there yet, but. I think if I was to kind of give direction, and the other thing I'll say is. I'm not super excited about this area right along I-5. Like, to me, I mean, I understand there's space out there. I mean, it's right along the freeway and I'm just not sure that would be my first choice, but I get if you're talking about where is there space, that's part of the conversation.
It seems to be happening more and more. If you drive up I-5 and you're headed, or should I say down I-5, then into California and you see just.
Housing development.
Yeah,
Is that what you're talking-
a
yeah.
lot of development, even
Lot
up in
of
Salem
yeah,
and stuff
right by
too,
the-
they're putting in those concrete walls, but they're
Yeah.
putting development right on
Yeah.
the freeway.
And people are definitely
Yeah.
doing that. I just am not a fan.
I
of it.
know, it's like all those ones by the railroad tracks. Ugh.
But at the same token, it's like when you start looking at where is the space that we have, you know,
So it sounds like as a group, we're saying that we would consider them having that discussion with folks about the mixed use in community commercial. That seems to be the direction I'm hearing.
I will now move on because we've still got about half an hour and I want to actually get into the concepts so you guys can see it. So This first one is mixed use housing, which would be allowed in the neighborhood commercial. So I apologize, this is kind of hard to see, but the maps are in front of you. There's tiny little circles of these properties spread out throughout the city. And
Help me understand the circles here.
those are your neighborhood commercial properties.
What does that mean?
They're properties that provide day-to-day commercial needs. So think of them like your neighborhood convenience store, a coffee shop, small business, something like that. So like down Mill Street, if you've ever driven down that area, there's like, I think a dentist shop, and there used to be like a bookstore, and there's a yarn store there on the corner of Pioneer Parkway. So you're thinking like those would kind of be your neighborhood commercial or your convenience stores, spread out kind of throughout the city. They're designed to offer walkability from a residential neighborhood to that commercial property.
So if we're looking here, just because I'm that, the Dollar Tree.
The Dollar Tree.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, this option would have, it would not be standalone housing, so it would still have to have some sort of commercial use. Again, the housing would be above the commercial use, or it could be behind the commercial use on the same site, but you would still have to have some sort of commercial use. The commercial use could not be, demolished and turned into standalone housing, because that's not the intent here. It's just to kind of allow more housing, options. Yeah, exactly. And then again, one restriction that we've kind of thought about with this is to consider a maximum height. So if the abutting residential district's maximum height is 35 feet, then we could also require a maximum height of 35 feet. So it wouldn't be any taller than a existing house that could be built right next to it.
Two-story or.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we're not gonna have giant, 5-story, 6-story tall, mixed use developments. And again, you can see it kind of on the continuum at the very top of it. You're seeing the more flexible to the more restrictive. And again, it's kind of in that middle area of, we're not saying it can have standalone housing. We are saying that it has to be mixed use. So it allows more flexibility than saying no housing
Right.
or 100% housing. It's right in that middle area. So and again, I'll go into the requesting your feedback, but this is the first concept I wanted to kind of show you. So now we're gonna focus a little bit on Main Street. So why we decided to look at Main Street, the first is the housing's already permitted in some specific areas. So again, if you saw our existing conditions, that area between 42nd and 48th, that's a mixed use area according to our East Main refinement plan. So that allows standalone housing or mixed use housing in that area in particular. Then there's some previous plans and concepts that were established for a desire for more housing along Main Street. You can see on the screen the Main Street Corridor Vision Plan. This was a vision plan that we completed in 2015, and it was kind of a look at what we could do with Main Street conceptually. There's more of an opportunity again for development along Main Street, especially those vacant and redevelopable parcels we talked about, right? You can see some properties that maybe are not being utilized to the best opportunity they could be. And then but we still have to take into consideration our employment needs, right? If we allow housing in multiple commercial districts, even in this area on Main Street or throughout the city, that could put pressure on our employment land supply. So taking all of that into consideration, you're gonna see that in the concepts along Main Street. So this first one is the most flexible of the options along Main Street. This is to allow housing on sites that meet certain criteria. So if you're looking at the map, it's the most flexible of the options in that it would allow housing on arterial streets. Technically, Main Street and 42nd is arterial streets. So it would just allow standalone housing or housing that's part of a mixed use development or continue to allow commercial along that street. But the clause is that the properties would have to be under an acre to not impact our commercial and employment land inventory. So again, this would limit new housing to certain areas and site sizes. Our commercial, industrial, and buildable lands inventory found that overall, we had a surplus of commercial and mixed-use properties under 1 acre. So that's why we chose the cutoff of 1 acre. If you're over an acre on Main Street, again, commercial's required, we're not gonna allow housing, standalone, mixed use. It would just be under an acre, along Main Street. And this map doesn't show all of the acreage along Main Street because it'd probably be pretty piecemeal. I'm just showing all of the commercial district, basically along Main Street.
So for me to try to grasp the size, the little property that sold on like 15th, 16th and Main Street,
Mhm.
they used to be the,
Yeah,
okay,
Yeah.
about how large is that?
that's
lot?
about an acre.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
a good size lot.
Yep.
What
It
did
used to
you
be a nursery. It's right on the corner of 16th and Main, just before you get to like 14th, where they have all the, where the 7-Eleven is. It's on that same side of the street as 7-Eleven. It's a empty, big empty lot, and it was purchased, and I think
It
there's
was.
gonna be some
Income qualified housing.
income qualified
Yeah.
housing, yeah.
Yep.
So are there a lot of 1 acre parcels along that stretch?
I think,
like
there's
that.
definitely under 200. I would guess that there's maybe around 100, but most of them have probably already been developed. So you gotta think about it from that standpoint too. Most probably already have some sort of commercial development. So you probably you'd be asking that developer, okay, are you gonna build housing above it? Or are you gonna demolish this commercial building and build standalone housing? Or are you gonna keep it commercial? It's completely up to you. We're just allowing the opportunity that it could be standalone housing if you want it to be. But yeah, not as many as on the screen, as you're probably thinking.
So if we're thinking about an acre parcel and we're thinking about multifamily, I'm just trying to conceptualize, what that looks like in terms of you have your 1 acre parcel, say we're talking about mixed use. How much housing does that really generate out of like that one? And I'm wondering what's possible there. I mean, I get that it's more if it's standalone housing because obviously you can put an apartment there and there's, multiple floors kind of thing. But if you've got a bottom floor that's commercial and then you've got a top floor that's residential, kind of factoring in that, there has to be some lot size for parking and all of that. How much,
Has to be parking? State doesn't require parking anymore.
I know they don't, but
A lot of places aren't doing it, just for the.
But
it-
rentability,
it's
I know,
not
it's terrible.
It's not required, but it's still an option, and this is an assumption on my part. I think that developers are gonna wanna at least provide some parking because people still drive cars.
There's still demand for it.
And I think there might be a time when that changes, but I don't think that's today, and so that's why I put, there's an assumption there, but you're right, it's not required. But, so I'm just wondering, how many units do we get out of something like that?
Well, I'm kind of thinking of like the climate friendly area presentation, and I think they said like you could do 4 levels before you have to have like steel reinforcement. So you could have like 4 stories. And that'd be a lot of units.
It's true.
And in a lot of the middle housing that I'm working on now, they might only be like, they're able to take a lot that's under 10,000 square feet. Sometimes they're like 8,400 square feet and they're putting 4plexes on there.
Mhm.
And they aren't putting any, and there's a lot of them are not doing parking, but they're required to do a pedestrian access out to the street. So, or they're on an alley, right? So they can do that. But yeah, I'm seeing a ton of triplexes and 4plexes on
in Eugene.
on
Yeah.
very small lots. I'm probably on my 26th one, and then what is it just now going to be August? There's a lot. So taking one house that you have and then putting a duplex or a triplex on the other half. It's-
I would guess around like 50 to 60, probably,
Yeah, it's a
on average.
So that's a fair amount of housing
Mhm.
you're talking about. I mean, it's not, because I was thinking like, well, if we're talking like 10 or 12, then, but if we're talking like a decent amount, then, I can see how that moves the needle.
Yeah, and we can absolutely place like minimum density. So I think that 42nd to 48th Street, because we don't have standards right now necessarily, because it's a commercial district, right? It's a commercial district, but we do allow standalone housing and we do allow housing that could be mixed use, right? Commercial with housing above or commercial in the front, residential behind. Usually we look to the medium density residential or high density residential density standards, and they have a minimum, right? So it could be with R2, it's 14, with R3, I think it's 28. So you still have to hit that minimum density requirement. It's not gonna be like 10 to 12 units. We'll be looking for more. Okay, let's get through a couple more. All right, so the next option, a little bit more limiting than option one, obviously. So this concept is some mixed use areas. So this is the properties, the first one farther along between 42nd and 48th. Again, that's a mixed use area in our East Main refinement plan. So that's an existing mixed use area. We'll just get a little bit more clear about if it could allow standalone housing or mixed use housing, what the design standards are, things like that, in our code. And then the other part that you're kind of seeing closer to downtown in our Main Street Corridor Vision Plan, they had a proposal to create a new mixed use area between 14th and 23rd. So that could be something that we could expand a mixed use area. We could call it mixed use commercial or mixed use employment along that area. So just in those areas, we could allow standalone housing, we could allow mixed use housing, we could continue to allow commercial. And then everywhere else outside of that, it remains community commercial. So whatever is allowed in community commercial, not standalone housing, not mixed use, it would stay that way. There's no minimum acreage requirement. It's just in these areas. And I'm pretty sure, like, if you've ever driven down Main Street and you think about where it transitions from a 5-lane highway kind of back down into a 2-lane highway, it's around 19th, 20th, that's where the speeds start to slow down a little bit. So in the Main Street Corridor Vision Plan, they imagined it as kind of an alive after 5 mixed use area where you were going to see a lot more walkability, a lot more local businesses with residents walking to those businesses, attractive landscaping, parking.
Like the
things
south side of A Street.
Main Street, yeah.
What is
So South A is like an industrial area.
the whole thing is?
Not all of it, but quite a bit along that corridor is industrial. So it'd be Main Street. So like you said, the 16th and Main property, that would be like a mixed use commercial. So you could have, again, your commercial on the ground floor, residential above. It could be standalone residential. There's some existing apartment complexes around that area. There's some small businesses along that area. It's kind of a mix of uses already. It's just that the traffic slows down a little bit. So it's a little bit more pedestrian friendly for people. If you're thinking about it from that walkability standpoint.
Is there any stomach to wanna change some of that industrial over on A Street to be? I mean, I know
Yeah.
that big Karatko Park property that was. I look at that and I think, what a great place to put just a ton of apartments with the bus stop right there, this street and all those businesses there. It just seems like a really, really good place to put.
Where that train company was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like
Just kind
5th,
of
6th, 7th, 8th.
there.
I think
Along A Street.
Mhm.
have to take a look at the boundary, but I think that's probably in the climate friendly area already. I have to look and see.
I think the Karatko is. I think that's.
It goes down to the railroad,
Yeah.
and up to
Okay.
14.
Okay,
So
that
that
is,
is already in a climate friendly area.
which means that it's buildable for mixed use and that sort of thing. Okay, all
Yeah.
right, cool.
Or
That's
will
great.
be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once we adopt all the amendments.
So it's kind of like, basically this proposal was further along South A, it could be mixed use employment.
Gotcha.
So not necessarily all industrial, it could be still business focused, mixed use employment could allow commercial, could allow industrial, those mix of uses. You could have a live work situation as long as there was compatibility taken into consideration. That's on South A until you hit 23rd. And then on Main from 14th to 23rd,
Yes.
that would be a mixed use commercial district.
Yeah, that would make sense right there because it's also really close to like near both of the CFAs in that area too, and there's like bus rapid or pretty reliable transportation right
Yes.
there.
And 21st too, if you're thinking about it from that intersection. So basically from like 14 to 21st, 21st also has quite a bit of shopping. There's that shopping
Yeah,
center.
stores.
Yeah, exactly, is at
Restaurants
that
and that.
intersection. Yep.
Maybe get that on the road on to 21st. It'd be nice to update that road.
All right, one more. And then the last option is the most limiting of the alternatives. So this one would just expand opportunities for mixed use or standalone housing at key intersections. So here I tried to highlight what those key intersections were. In our Main Street Corridor Vision Plan, they identified 21st, 30th, and 42nd as those key intersections. So those would be the areas where we could say, okay, here we will allow again a mixed-use building, standalone residential, or it can continue to be commercial, but just at those intersections, not again down the entire corridor. Everywhere in between there will continue to be community commercial. So on to the questions, because I know you guys have a lot of feedback to give me. So the first one was about the neighborhood commercial district. Do you support exploring the proposed changes to allow mixed-use buildings in the neighborhood commercial district? Do you have concerns about that change? And then I'm gonna read the Main Street, but I'll go back to the maps. The Main Street, which, if any, alternatives do you support for allowing housing on Main Street? Do you think the development code should be more or less flexible than today with regards to housing on Main Street? So
I'm gonna jump in here and we're not asking you to make that decision. We're asking, should we explore these with the public?
What questions should be on the table?
all right, so neighborhood commercial is back on the screen. That was the first question. Do you support exploring the proposed changes to allow mixed-use buildings in neighborhood commercial? Do you
So
have any
again, that's like a
concerns?
convenience store that's in the middle of a neighborhood and they could put apartments above it. But not
It's
more
not
than,
standalone.
it's not standalone and no more than
Like 35 feet?
whatever
Yeah.
the building standard is for the neighborhood. I don't see why not on that one.
I guess let me ask. Are the plans that we're recommending mutually exclusive? Like, can we say we should explore all of these options? Is that
It's
possibly?
completely up.
Cause I'm just like, it's like pick the best one here, like this one wouldn't. Be bit my top choice, but I do see that. There's places where it might make sense. And if we can increase housing in certain pockets where you're not gonna be able to put an apartment complex, but maybe you can expand housing in certain areas. I can see that being explored further.
And that was actually like, speaking of feedback, because I've already taken the code audit results to my technical advisory committee. That happened at the end of June. We just filled them in basically on what we filled you guys in on May. One of the feedback responses that I got was, I wish that we had the option to do a mixed use building in areas where we had a coffee shop or a convenience store. I wish we had the opportunity to build housing above, and you don't allow that right now in your code. That was kind of in response to somebody looking to retrofit a commercial building, particularly along Mill Street. And they just said, that's not really an option in your code, but I would like that option, and what are the opportunities to do
At
that?
this point, I don't see why we would take anything off the table. If somebody wants to make a proposal, why should our code be such that they don't have the opportunity? Why are we saying no? We should be looking for ways to say yes.
That's kind of where I was going at it with, that's why I asked, are they mutually exclusive? Because I think the reality of it is we need the most flexible options, realizing that we don't know how this is all gonna pan out. We don't know what developers are gonna wanna do what. And I think that if we allow for the most flexible options, it doesn't necessarily mean that people can build whatever they want, where they want. I think we're a ways away from that, but we know we need more housing, and it's 400 and some houses like next year alone. I mean, and then And then we're gonna need more the following year, so
Right.
it's not like the demand is going down, and I think that if we limit ourselves, you know, we're gonna pass on harder problems to future groups.
I absolutely agree, Commissioner Buck. And yeah, I think all options should be on the table and developers, that's what they do.
That's their job, yeah.
That part out and they won't develop if the demand, if something changes. You know, right now, this is what the projection is, but if something changes, the demand slows for some reason, or who knows, you know, they won't develop. I mean, as long as it's
I'm
there.
stunned by the creative ideas that developers are coming up with.
Yeah.
Well-
It's crazy.
And some of the developers I've talked to, you know, I know two developers that won't do projects in Eugene because it's just too difficult. And I think that the more barriers we can remove
You mean in Springfield? They won't-
in Eugene,
Oh, really?
they'll work here,
Huh.
but they're not. Springfield is a lot easier to work with. The planning department's a lot easier to work with, and you can get things done. And I've heard at least two of them that's like, it's hard to get through to get projects approved and get things done in Eugene. That hasn't been their experience. And I think the more flexible we can be in Springfield, we've got a lot to like out here in terms of development.
See, I'm hearing just the opposite. I'm dealing with the same developers over and over again, and they're just like, especially the costs. It's significantly more expensive to build in Springfield.
The cost is an issue in Springfield.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our fees and a lot of we make it expensive. And hopefully that's something that can get worked on going forward, but I know you've done a lot of work in that particular area.
Yeah, I mean, we still need infrastructure and it still costs, so.
Okay, do you guys have any thoughts again about the Main Street options? So again, we had anything under an acre on Main and 42nd, we would consider. Then we also had, if we limited again, just the mixed use area, so between 42nd and 48th. And again, between 14th and 23rd, if we wanted to limit it down again. And then even further, if we just wanted to do the absolute minimum, we could just consider key intersections.
Well,
Any thoughts?
The one thing I was wondering about with the under an acre is could there be, and just something to think about moving forward, could there be an option of, I have an acre and a third or an acre and a half, could there be something written into where people have the option of applying for an exception to allow them to develop, if it's like under 2, but whatever, I just am thinking if there are those where somebody's like, I got this thing, but it's like 1 acre plus a quarter,
1.1.
right? Yeah.
Rent.
Is there something that we could do just to think about that so that it isn't just like it's an acre?
The minor variance allows a numerical adjustment up to 30%
Okay.
of most standards, so I think you could look at whether that requirement fit into that minor variance.
And it's something to
And
think
it's
about.
expensive, I just applied.
What's that?
It's expensive.
A minor variance?
Yeah.
Oh, it's very,
Oh, a minor,
It's $3,200.
oh,
Well, at least residential.
yeah, I thought minor variances could be, well, that's probably because you're not already, yeah.
Yeah.
A minor variance is a type 2 that so it can happen in another type 2 application. But if you don't have another type 2 application, then you have to pay for the type of application. And part of that is around state law on what kind of process we have to provide for certain kinds of decisions. And because there's some, it's a limited land use decision, so there's some discretion used in that minor variance. We have to provide mail notice and an opportunity for people to comment in writing, and so that increases the cost, unfortunately. But if you were just, not devil's advocate, but just as another example, if you were gonna come in with a type 2 decision anyway, because you're gonna take advantage of some architectural flexibility, or propose an alternative to some other standards, then the minor variance wouldn't cost you anything extra.
It just
I think.
packaged with it. so
Yeah, it's
there's-
just part of
Makes
it can be
sense.
done as part of that type of decision.
So
cheaper in bulk.
So you described this one as most flexible. And so is that to say that it would encompass,
No, we're just looking at Main Street between 42nd and the 126th.
I know, but
But I think what I'm hearing is we could do anywhere along Main Street with that acreage threshold of under 1 acre, but then we could also add that area between 14th and 21st as being mixed use, and along the intersections, we could expand. What I'm hearing him say, can we add these together?
Right, so this would take the place of these two, because those areas would be encompassed in this already. And then so if you take these two options and we say, let's move forward with those two options, it gives you kind of all the options that are on the table. So rather than talking about the limiting options, let's move forward with these. Potentially, we could do that, and we're not losing anything by saying, let's table these and
Yeah.
go this direction.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I think we may have a concern about is we just have to make sure that we're not taking away, like, we're not impacting our commercial and industrial buildable lands inventory. We need to make sure that, as long as we have that surplus, we're not then gonna have a deficit by allowing all of
How much
everything.
of a surplus do we have?
I think it's 200 plus, acres of surplus.
Yeah, and I think there's gonna be different ways we can address that, like if we are requiring commercial on the ground floor, then we're still meeting that employment need on that lot, even though we're allowing residential up above. So we can, I think what you're giving us direction on so far is what we really wanted, and then we'll explore that and come back with more of the nuanced options of like, yeah, this is what we can do in terms of maintaining our commercial and buildable lands inventory, or this is what types of things. So, I mean, you're giving us exactly what we needed tonight. As we start, as Haley mentioned, we're gonna start doing more public outreach next week, and we wanted to make sure that we are in line with city leadership's direction before we start talking about things. If you didn't wanna go there, that we're not asking.
Right.
Cause I'm gonna have 3 events next week alone. You'll be catching me, National Night Out at the Les Schwab Center on Tuesday night. Wednesday, we have the Multicultural Plaza event, during the day. And then on Thursday, I'll be presenting to the City Club, around noonish. So, probably close to these presentation slides that you saw tonight, so. Busy week next week of lots of events, and then we have a couple more events the following week, so.
You're a pro by the time you get done with this.
Yeah, I'll be talking a lot. So, and I actually really look forward to like asking these questions of the community and having them be like, yes, I love this idea, or I hate it.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what the commercial side and the industrial side has to say about this. Cause it's really easy to be like, we need housing, let's do this makes sense, open it up. But what are we not seeing, or what potentials are out there that it could negatively affect?
Those
Those
guys on
businesses.
Main Street, they're so worried that we're gonna do something to their businesses and take away the whole Main Street.
That's why we're
Trans-
here.
That's why-
Tonight.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, I think,
Don't tell them I said it was okay. No.
no, I think that.
You got me elected.
I think that one of the things that I think when it comes to the businesses on Main Street, it really comes down to how you approach the conversation, because I think if you approach the conversation as, hey, we're creating opportunity here, some people will be like, fabulous, I see this as an opportunity. And some people will be like, I'm not interested, but they get the option of not being interested, like, this
It's
is.
not a surprise. That's what really pisses people off.
Yeah, and I think that if we come down and we say, hey, we're changing the zoning, so we're allowing for the potential of, mixed commercials, so there's housing above businesses. I guess that there's gonna be some businesses that say, that sounds great, and there's gonna be others that are like, that doesn't make sense for us.
But you can just keep your same commercial business as
Right.
is.
And maybe get frequented more because there's.
Exactly.
Well, and I also think that the average person in Springfield doesn't quite understand like the mandates that are placed on us. It's like, it's not a matter of we want to, or maybe we should. It's like, we have to create more housing. Like, it's not really a choice. And the question is, where are we gonna do it? How are we gonna do it? Not if we're gonna do it. Cause it's very easy to say, oh, we don't really wanna do that. It's not really on the table for us to decide that. So what are we gonna do with the cards we're dealt? And like I said, I think the guys on Main Street, there's, there's gonna be some of them that are gonna kind of have their, flashbacks to, prior projects where they were upset. But I think that if they were approached in a way of saying, hey, we're trying to create flexibility so that people on Main Street that want this can look at it as an investment opportunity, and those that don't, it doesn't make sense. Okay.
Absolutely. All right, before I adjourn this evening, the next thing on the agenda real quick was to go over the outreach materials.
One question.
Yes,
Did this or is this going to the TAC that's made up of
it would.
crafters and?
Yes, it would absolutely go to them. Yep. Yep. Okay. So the engagement materials. So in front of you, you have a fact sheet, and then there was also a flyer. The fact sheet is a little bit more information, detail wise. It has just typical questions.
This is the fact sheet.
That is our Springfield housing strategy. So some of the graphics that are on the flyer looks like this, and then it's got lines in the back.
Yeah.
Part of the
It's got-
graphic here in the corner is from the Springfield housing strategy. And it's
old.
it is old, so that's why I printed you the Springfield housing strategy, which actually has the correct information. It's like down here is some of the information that is quoted here. So that would, of course, be replaced on this handout before it went out public next week. And then, of course, the existing conditions, there's just some edits that were made to that. You have a copy of the most updated one here. That would also go here and replace this map, so.
Yeah,
Um,
and even though this doesn't have draft on it, it came to us in a PDF from the consultant, so we couldn't really fix
edit
it.
it.
So there are changes that we've identified that we need to make already, so this is really just draft. But it was to give you an idea of this is the messaging, so even if it's not today, if you're looking through this and you see some issues, give us a call or send us an email so that we can make some adjustments before we start sharing this out next week.
And who is all this, who's this going to?
Anybody that I engage with next week, so like I said, I have National Night Out, which is like a public safety
You're
event.
handing it out at the
Yeah,
events,
yeah.
okay.
Anybody who has questions like on the project, they come up to my table and they're like, ooh, I want some more information. I'll be like, I have a handout, and then we also have a business card in case they don't want the handout, which just has a QR code, and that links to our project website on Springfield Oregon Speaks. Which actually have been really well liked. We have dropped them at a lot of local businesses, especially downtown. Right as you're like checking out, they were sitting right there. And so people sometimes be like, ooh, business card, and grab one while they're grabbing a slice of pizza or something. So we ran out of those quite fast when we did advertisements about the technical advisory committee. So yeah, it was great. And this actually also has a look ahead at our schedule too, which is also handy dandy in case people are like, how far are you into this project? And I want to know more.
Awesome.
Yeah, any feedback, let us know.
I mean, the only feedback that I would give you is there's a lot of information on this. and I think it's challenging to digest.
When I saw this, I was like, that's what we're giving people that want. That's like,
I mean, this is certainly better, but I would still say that it's borderline on
Yes.
too much.
agreed.
That's just my,
You gotta keep it
Got it.
really simple.
Maybe just the for more information.
Yeah.
Here, the QR code or separate.
yeah, and I think that really helping people understand the problem first, like why. I think focusing on the why and giving people some of those facts and the numbers, like we need to create 400 and some more houses next, like that, we need to do that. And not because we want to, but we need to, so we're posed with a challenge and a question of how do we do that? And this is some of our ideas. And I think once people understand what the question is and they get that concept, because there's a lot of people that don't really understand that there's a housing deficit. And I think that we have to help reach those people so they understand, like, no, that we do need more housing. So I would say the simpler you can make it and the more focus on what the problem is, so people really get that. Because once people grasp the concept that this is the problem, now they're open to solutions.
Random question, but does the ADU count in that housing count? when people are adding
don't think
ADUs to their
does it?
property.
Oh,
It does, okay.
I thought you said it did.
Yeah, it seems like I remember getting told.
Yeah,
that it
I thought you told us it wasn't. ADUs didn't count.
Well, I thought Counselor Stout asked about renting out a bedroom and that didn't count. But if you create an.
An actual ADU, okay.
It does count,
would.
okay.
And then are we still looking at those, I know they're wheels, but the tiny houses?
Well, those would not count. Those, I mean, we are looking at allowing them more broadly.
Okay, all right.
But those would not count as housing units because they're not permanent housing.
Oh, pretty cool though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you guys wanna see some,
They could
not
allow-
now, but I'm saying.
I'm gonna
Permanent housing
stop the
if they
recording,
were
so.
in-
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
if they
stop
were
sharing, sorry.
in manufactured home park,
No, I go
like there's
walk
some,
my dog.
Yeah.
but this work you're doing to allow them outside of the development code is where they don't count.
But
But there are definitely ways people could be doing tiny homes or RVs within the development code and
Right,
they
and we
would
can't put them on our
count.
property, like an
Yes.
ADU.
You're right.
It's like, it's not counted like it.
Which is interesting because the tiny houses they're built to a specific standard to a, you know,
Yeah.
that ANSI or whatever the standard is that they have to be built to. So I think that they should
You see the-
consider
like-
different.
And we can talk about it more with
Yeah.
example, but I think the trade-off is that if we don't, so if we count them.